we're giving a shout out to
Something else.
something else, Daddy.
This is Nicole Matara, Great Warrior Wolf, and you are listening to Something Else.
I'm Tony Cini, and you're listening to Something Else.
Hey everybody, it's Rich Palladino, the voice of New England, and you are listening to Something Else with Aria.
And welcome to one of our world famous bonus shows. This is bonus show number 5. And this is a different version of our countdown, the top 7 at 7, which debuted like a month ago as you're listening to this. Because to be honest, I seriously didn't have a strong enough desire to watch, present day pro wrestling, every fucking week, even if it was just the main event segment. So we're going to do another countdown. So I hope you all enjoy it. This is bonus show number 5. A nice, fun little way to kick back, enjoy the weekend, and remember the joyousness of Sunday morning countdown radio shows. And as I noted last time, yes, it turns out they still do the Rick D's weekly top 40 countdown. And I was just, blissfully unaware of it until I came up with this brilliant idea to do a callback. So this isn't so much of a callback as much of a ripoff. This is a direct ripoff of, that. But it's Sunday morning. It's 7 o'clock when I'm posting this. So what the hell? It's the top 7 at 7. Even though odds are most of y'all aren't going to actually listen to this at 7. So, keeping in mind that this is, we're doing a top 7 countdown here. Now it's 2024, and I don't want to break any news to y'all, but a few years ago there was this thing called the pandemic, and during the pandemic, the whole world shut down except for mostly pro wrestling. Where to be honest, like WWE, AEW, and Impact kept producing shows and never stopped. Legitimately. Like, it's the weirdest fucking thing, especially looking back, that those are the 3 companies that never stopped producing, content. And so from that led to a lot of wrestlers deciding to not go to work for a little while over fear of COVID, over fear of the unknown, because let's be honest, no matter what you think about COVID, and I'm not here to debate it, I'm not going to sit here and fight anybody about it, but there was a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of people decided to play it safe and stay home, at least until more, serious restrictions went into place. And it led to some very random pushes during the pandemic. And these were people who, I'm not saying they aren't talented. That is the first thing I want to point out. None of the people I'm going to say on this show are untalented. And nor am I going to say that none of them didn't deserve to get TV time and get some spotlight to try to get themselves over. However, the key to this is people who were suddenly and somewhat inexplicably pushed stronger than they may have ever had beforehand due to the fact that there wasn't a better second option. And we're going to count down from 7 to 1, and we're also going to throw in some honorable mentions as well. And there's a few of these things that I actually forgot about until I was doing some research. But let's dive in. So this is the top 7 most random pandemic pushes, starting with number 7. The Wrestle House Crew, Impact Wrestling. So what happens when you take a dozen undercard acts and throw them into a house for a faux reality show for 10 weeks? In theory, it's a load of crap. But in practice, Wrestle House was a fun mixture of skits and pro wrestling. Think Being the Elite meets Big Brother. Now, the overarching story over these 10 weeks, because yes, it wasn't just, let's just do wacky skits in a house. There was an overarching story, which was the budding romance between Taya Valkyrie's then manager, Johnny Bravo, and the demon assassin, Rosemary, which led to the wedding that is kind of well remembered because this was when Bravo was shot in the chest, and it actually does lead to a sequel the following year where Bravo marries a swingerella. It's also a breakout moment for Johnny Swinger, who turned this into a run as the proprietor of an illegal gambling hall, Swinger's Palace. And others in the house include Kylie Ray, Susie, Crazy Steve, Triple XL, and Tommy Dreamer as the matchmaker. I'll be honest, it I don't even know if it would hold up because I haven't gone back and ever rewatched any of this. But I will tell you, and trigger warning ahead of time, and there might be some people rolling their eyes, but fuck it, trigger warning. This was during the period of time when I was going through a really tough time mental health wise. And this was around the time when I tried to kill myself. And I was reaching for straws to find things to brighten up my day, brighten up my week. And for some stupid reason, these skits just entertained the fuck out of me. And they gave me something to look forward to every week. As stupid and as corny as that sounds, I made sure to watch Impact every week for the Wrestle House skit because it was stupid, it was fun, and I won't sit here and say, "Oh yeah, Rosemary saved my life," but I'll sit here and tell you that, I give so much credit to all these people for giving me something to look forward to during the darkest point of my life. So, hats off to them, clapping there and there. Now I continue to watch Impact and not just the Wrestle House thing as we go to number 6, Rohit Raju, Impact Wrestling. Now, of course, everyone remembers 2017 when WWE took Jinder Mahal, a man who never won a match, and suddenly made him WWE champion. This was only slightly less random. Raju was Impact's resident wrestler of Indian descent, like Jinder. His number of wins could be counted on one hand until he suddenly not only won a match, but became X Division champion. And he actually had an impressive 4-month run with the belt. And this was really legitimately, like the only time he ever really got a push on, national television. Because he wasn't getting pushed beforehand. Before this, I think he was in the Desi Hit Squad with somebody else, and they were, oh my God, they were managed by that Canadian gentleman whose name escapes me. It's got, I can't fucking remember, but they were managed by, Gama Singh. They were managed by the legendary Gama Singh. I don't think they ever won a fucking match. And then again, because they had to push somebody, and Rohit was there, he was actually pretty decent on the microphone and had a nice run with the X Division title. He lost it to Manic, and then he went back to never winning. He eventually left Impact. He was with AEW briefly, but that didn't end up working out. And now he's just, mostly doing indies. Number 5. Number 5. So this one's going to be a little controversial, but I'm going to explain things, and hopefully, y'all remember what I'm about to talk about. But number 5 is Universal Champion Braun Strowman, WWE. Now, Braun, let's be honest, Braun was always the recipient of a decent-sized push, but the pandemic took Braun out of the doghouse and into the penthouse. When the pandemic began, this was when, all wrestling shows were canceled. And when I say WWE, AEW, and TNA were the only 3 companies running shows, I mean WWE, AEW, and TNA were the only 3 companies running shows. And so a lot of independent wrestlers began looking for different ways to make extra money. They would go on Twitter and they'd, encourage fans to, use their, canceled WrestleMania trip money and buy some merch, maybe buy a t-shirt, try to support their favorite indie guys. And Braun Strowman, who never wrestled an indie match in his career before his first WWE run, mocked indie wrestlers and told them all to go get a real job. The blowback was immense and immediate. And it was so immense that Strowman was originally not going to be booked for WrestleMania. Like, I don't think anybody remembers this because, like, it all happened so fast with what does happen. So he was originally going to be off the show entirely until Roman Reigns pulled himself out of Mania because of The Miz, because The Miz showed up on a closed set when he was sick to do an angle with the Usos and the New Day. And Roman Reigns, who was pissed, took himself out of WrestleMania, and so they needed someone to wrestle Goldberg. And to be honest, like, it was such an obvious choice, but at the same time, like, I remember racking my head, but yeah, it was Strowman. Strowman, who went from not being on the show at all to getting a 5-month run as Universal Champion as he beat Goldberg on the show. And yeah, he goes into a feud with Bray Wyatt, which really wasn't that great, which, although that pretty much describes most Bray Wyatt feuds, was really not that great. I'm sorry, shouldn't speak ill of the dead, but he had a lot of bad feuds. Like, you can't even deny that, people. Number 4. Number 4. Ken Shamrock. Impact. Yes. Impact is getting 3 out of the first 4 things here. So, this is another person who's already getting a little bit of a push, whose push increased tenfold when there were no other options. Shamrock, who had already been announced as going into the Impact Hall of Fame, began a random feud with former world champion Sami Callihan, which appeared to all the world to be a way to give Callihan something to do and give him a big win, because this was after he was the world champion and lost the belt to Tessa Blanchard, and as a way to get him away from Tessa and do something, anything else, other than feuding with her. So that led to their first match, and I think it was really their only match. It was an unsanctioned match at the Rebellion show, and Shamrock won. Seriously. Shamrock won. He won. Shamrock, who didn't win on pay-per-view since 2002, and that includes, shoot and worked matches. He won. And that actually led to them forming a bit of a scumbag alliance. They challenged the North for the World Tag Team titles. They lost the match. And then Shamrock started feuding with another former world champion, as after Eddie Edwards lost the belt to Eric Young, he started feuding with Shamrock. And, just like Callihan, this wasn't done to give Eddie a big win after a world title loss. This led to Shamrock beating Eddie at Bound for Glory. So yeah, weirdness, randomness, and it's funny because I think Shamrock wrestles once, maybe twice more, and that was it. So I remember he had a world title match against Rich Swann that he lost, and that may have been his last match in Impact. So that then takes us to number 3 and number 2. The WWE Mystery Men. WWE. So WWE became obsessed with Mystery Men in the summer of 2020, and specifically Raw became the home of Mystery Men. Now, first, we saw a renewed push for Akira Tozawa, which, that could have just been an entry on his own, but he shows up with buffoon ninjas, who were there mostly to be thrown around. One exception was a 7'3" ninja who never got in the ring, but would eventually unmask, first as Shane McMahon's bouncer during Raw Underground, and then as AJ Styles' bodyguard almost. Over on NXT, it was the quickest of masked mystery people reveals, and this one I'm not even including in the countdown. But 1 week out of the blue, someone in a ghost face costume showed up, and then 2 weeks later unmasked as Indy Hartwell. But then the real number 2 here, the WWE's most famous group of randoms, first started as a group of masked men who wreaked havoc across all shows before becoming exclusive to one show, because that's what, groups that are trying to take over the world do. They become exclusive to 1/3 of the television shows. It was, in fact, the group known as Retribution, booked as and later forgotten as a group of NXT wrestlers wanting to make a name for themselves despite no one knowing who they were. That was hard to prove, since one of the members was blue hair Mia Yim, who famously lost all of her accoutrements in a live TV match with Liv Morgan. Mustafa Ali eventually turned heel to become the leader of their group, which briefly feuded with the Hurt Business, never seemed to win, and then randomly disbanded. And literally, I don't think a single one of them ever really got anything out of that. I think the only person, still in WWE now is Mia Yim, and she had to leave and come back. But it's like, yeah, that like was it's like out of nowhere. WWE somehow started loving their mystery man, and it led to some random ass pushes. I must tell you that. Now, before we go to number one, we got to do some honorable mentions here. And these are people who got a bit of a random push, but not random enough to crack the top 7, in my humble opinion. And the first was Daba Kato, and he would eventually be known as Commander Aziz, but he made his debut during Raw Underground, and he went undefeated for a month before losing to Braun Strowman. Then, also, honorable mention goes to the WWE pay-per-view advertising team, because this was when, instead of keeping with the usual pay-per-view names, everything got weird subtitles that would be repeated ad nauseum. For instance, the horror show at Extreme Rules, SummerSlam, You'll Never See It Coming, Clash of Champions Gold Rush, and Survivor Series Best of the Best are just examples of this. And I'd give it a pass with Survivor Series Best of the Best of the Best, sir, with honors, but it wasn't. And here's one that in addition, I'll probably get a little bit of heat for. Dolph Ziggler. Now, Dolph at this point got an annual push every summer, and it usually led to him, in the upper half of the card, and meant nothing because he'd lose and go right back down the card. So it meant less than ever his annual push as he was plucked out of a feud with Otis to suddenly be a challenger for the WWE Championship and feud with Drew McIntyre for close to 6 weeks. It culminated in a match where Dolph had Extreme Rules, but Drew had to follow the rules. And this was a similar stip they did in a match between Carlito and Triple H a decade earlier, which didn't do anything for Carlito either, because everyone knew Triple H wasn't losing to Carlito, and everyone knew Drew wasn't losing to Dolph. All right. So with that, let's go to number one. The number one most random pandemic push. And, it's the only entrant from New Japan, and that probably gives away exactly who it is. Number one. The IWGP Heavyweight Champion, Evil. The ultimate random push. So New Japan was not one of the companies that, did, the nonstop shows during the pandemic. They spent 3 or 4 months on the shelf, coming back in June. And the first thing they did was rebook the annual New Japan Cup, which is normally held in March, to happen in June. And so thanks to numerous substitutions by people originally scheduled for the tournament who were unable to get into the country, most notably former IWGP champion Jay White, 2018 Cup winner Zack Sabre Jr., and future IWGP champion Will Ospreay, they needed to bring in a bunch of new talent and come up with a way to push someone new to the moon. For some reason, that meant Evil was chosen. Evil. Evil had been a lower card member of Los Ingobernables de Japón, who turned on his LIJ teammates to join Bullet Club. That by itself would be random enough, except then he won the New Japan Cup, and the very next day, he won the double title. The IWGP and the Intercontinental title. This is when they had the 2 belts that Naito had won at Wrestle Kingdom. And I think this may have been his second defense, and he lost them to fucking Evil of all people. New Japan's bookers, Jado and Gato, pretty much immediately realized this was a bad idea, and he almost immediately was booked to lose the titles back to Naito. And then after losing the belts, he immediately goes back down the cards, and this reign is New Japan's answer to Jinder Mahal as the most out-of-nowhere world title win in the past decade. Now, I think it's, that they wanted to start things off with a bang, and they were going to change the world title and put it on somebody. And I think it would have been Zack Sabre Jr. because you know, Zack had come so close. Zack had won, the New Japan Cup already. He'd gotten a few world title matches. And at that point, he was always like so close. And honestly, the pandemic killed his push out pretty much more than anybody else's because he never really got back to that level, at least within New Japan. But since ZSJ couldn't come in, they had to go with somebody else. And for some reason, they went with Evil. And they have. And the funny thing is, it's not like Evil lost the belt and it's like, okay, he's got to build himself back up, all this happy shit. Evil lost the belt and has never even come close to it ever again. Like, he'll get random title shots. He's got one coming up with Moxley in a few weeks, but it's like everybody knows he's not fucking winning. It's a match to give the pseudo credibility that Evil was IWGP champion, and now Moxley's going to beat a man who was IWGP champion, even though it's like, again, long forgotten and never cared about anyway. But so we'll see. Now, hopefully, we never have another pandemic. But if we do, I'm sure I'll do another top 7 most random pandemic pushes. And to be honest, this might be our last bonus show because, we've got the big announcement coming up shortly that's going to impact the Something Else Podcasting Network. But I hope you all enjoyed this. If I never do this again, I had fun doing it. But I want to thank everybody for listening. If you agree, if you disagree, let me know in the comments. The worst, if you disagree, like, really, what's the worst that you could say? Arya, you're a fucking dumbass for thinking Evil was the most random of all. Hey, maybe you think that. If you do, say something. But I want to thank everybody for listening, and we'll talk to you again later on.